Before we begin, let me introduce myself, and then I'm going to go around and have this fabulous group of women veterans that you see before you introduce them. So my name is Jennifer Lamb. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1994 to just after 9/11. I served in two different capacities. I enlisted in the Marine Corps first while I was in college. We'll talk about how people enter the military. When I enlisted, I was a nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons defense expert. My joke was you don't get any dates when you're in college, and that's what you do for a living. When I graduated from college, I became a supply officer and served on active duty in the Marine Corps. When I left the Marine Corps, I've had several jobs. Some of them were working in mental health, and specifically in mental health for veterans and women veterans, which I loved very much. And I'm currently an executive coach. I am the least exciting person here on this panel. Instead, I'd like to go around and have everybody introduce themselves a little bit. And so I'm just going to go by how I see you all on the screen. So Coral, can you kind of introduce yourself to our group here today?
I sure can, and you're definitely not the least interesting, least interested. Um, Hi everyone, my name is Coral Pettit. I am an Air Force veteran. I served from 2011 to 2019. I went in a little bit later than most people. I went in when I was 27, needed a life change and something little more powerful than what I was doing. And a friend of mine said, "You should join the military." And I said, "What?" And a week later, I was moving forward with it. It's definitely been one of the best experiences of my life. A lot of life lessons learned. I went in as a nurse, came out as a nurse, and currently work at the university as a clinical nurse specialist, which is an advanced practice nurse.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome this afternoon. Next, I'm going to go to Sam. Sam, can you introduce yourself to our group?
Yep. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sam or Samantha Sabota. I'm another Marine Corps veteran. I went to the service after college, but I think you'll see from some of the folks on the panel, I was an NROTC commissioner, or Reserve Officer Training Corps in college. So if there's any other midshipmen or cadets from the university, hello. Um, I was active from 2016 to 2022, so I recently left the service. While I was in, my primary role was a communications officer, so not communications as in marketing or public affairs, but communication systems. So ensuring, reliable networks and security between us, the Navy, aircraft, ground elements, as well as our sister services or allied forces abroad.
And then if we were to find you on campus right now, Sam, what do you do at U of M now?
Oh, because of how those skills kind of translate from military over to civilian side, I ended up working in a lot of space-based SATCOM systems. And so now I'm a project manager up at SPEARL, or the Space Physics Research Lab, here in the Climate and Space Sciences building up here on North Campus.
Gotcha. Christina, are you able to introduce yourself to us real quick?
Yes, hi, I'm Christina Wallach. I am a pediatric orthopedic surgeon at Mott Children's Hospital here with the university. And I entered the military in 1991 as a West Point cadet. So the military put me through college. When I graduated, I went on to active duty and spent 3 years on active duty as an AG, Adjutant General Corps officer, and decided I wanted to go to medical school. So the military then sent me to medical school, and I took a military scholarship and then graduated from Tulane University from medical school and did my military, all my training to become an orthopedic surgeon in the Army. And then so in total, I spent 21 years in the Army. And then got out of the Army in 2016 and now practice as a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. And it was a great experience for me. The military put me through all my education and all my training, and I'm very happy to be here. So thanks.
So Christina, real quick, some people might not know this, but a military base or a military post is often like a very micro city that provides everything that those service members need. Can you explain just a little bit about how you were working in pediatrics, even when you were working in the military?
Yeah, so in the Army and in all the services, the Air Force, the Navy, the bigger bases usually have pediatric subspecialists in their big facilities. And so I was in San Antonio, which is now the San Antonio Military Medical Center, and it's actually a center that has both Army and Air Force physicians, nurses, everybody. It's a big medical system for the military. So we took care of pediatric patients who were service member children. So, you know, the bases are huge and there are thousands of service members there. So we would take care of their children. And then there were times too when we would have children come to us from other services, sorry, from other bases that were nearby. So we would get people from, say, Fort Hood, which was a base nearby in Texas, and they would drive down to see us as the pediatric subspecialists. So yeah, what we did was very involved. Not every military base has pediatric subspecialists, but there's about 5 or 6 in the Army that do.
I just think it's fascinating. I mean, obviously, service members have children and their spouses also have children, but not everybody thinks of that when they first, think of what it's like to be on a military base or a post. Kira, why don't you introduce yourselves to us?
Hi, everybody. So I'm Kier Kangas, and I joined the Michigan Army National Guard. It was in 2008, and I joined as a carpenter mason, and then was a part of a military construction unit, which was up in Marquette, Michigan. As I kind of advanced through my military, I became a general construction supervisor. So that included adding on like plumbing and electrical work as well. And then now, though, I'm at a military police brigade out of Taylor, Michigan, and I'm their operations NCO. So kind of assist with like moving things around and tracking different units within the state. And throughout my career, I've served on a lot of different missions, both here in the States and then abroad. I've been to Afghanistan, Guatemala, Liberia. I've also been a part of supporting like the Michigan DNR and helping rebuild some of the state parks here. I was also activated during the COVID-19 pandemic within Michigan, also to DC to kind of assist during President Biden's inauguration. So we were there as well. But overall, I moved to Ann Arbor here within the last few months. I started at Michigan Medicine as a neuropsychology fellow. So that's what I've been mostly doing here on campus.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Kian, I've been practicing your name and I think I messed it up again. Can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Yes, you said it right, Jennifer. My name is Keon Dozier. I'm a second lieutenant, soon to be first lieutenant in the Army Reserve. I'm currently a chemical officer at a medical brigade in Columbus, Ohio. So I oversee how to decontaminate patients that have been exposed to chemical, biological, radiological contaminants. And where did I start? So I enlisted in 2018 as a 42 Alpha, and I did the simultaneous membership program through the Army Reserve while also doing ROTC at the University of Michigan. So that was a really cool experience because I was able to like actually see what I was getting myself into while learning how to be an officer. So I think that really helped set me up for success. And currently at the University of Michigan, I am pursuing a master's in biological chemistry, and I would like to go to medical school after. So hopefully I'll be like Christina soon. So yeah.
So one thing I find interesting, I was telling Phil Larson, who had put these Veterans Week together, that he had given me a list of individuals and I was just going pretty much for branch of service and trying to find people. And the number of veterans that I found that have careers now in STEM of some sort is, well, that represents just about everybody. It represents everybody here, including you, Anna. Why don't you introduce yourself if you can?
Okay, I don't know how STEMmy my life is compared to everyone else, but hi, my name is Anna Bingham. I served for 6 years and as a weather forecaster, achieving rank of staff sergeant in the Air Force. Weirdly enough, though, the majority of my assignments were being attached to the Army, which I loved because it gave me like the best of both worlds. The military took me to some challenging environments, including a deployment near the Syrian border, an operation of Inherent Resolve and Spartan Shield. That deployment really prepared me, though, for JRTC, where I didn't shower or use a toilet for 16 days, which is, a hardship in itself. During these experiences, I provided critical weather forecasts that safeguarded personnel, aircraft, and assets, ensuring mission critical success and protecting lives. Even as a baby airman, I routinely briefed senior leaders, including colonels and generals, on mission critical weather conditions. And while I'm extremely proud of the work and my deployments, my greatest achievements while I was in were always when I could help my fellow airmen, whether it was like boosting morale with fun training lessons or curating the perfect care packages, helping someone pass their PT test, or mentoring my troops. Those were like the moments that meant the most to me. And because I felt so much passion for the well-being of my like unit and troops, it wasn't surprising when I felt like I found a deep sense of purpose when I started facilitating our unit's like annual sexual assault prevention and response training, as well as the annual suicide prevention training to our like newest members. I would hold those sessions like in small groups in order to create meaningful discussions and genuine learning. This experience made me want to address the challenges faced by service members, particularly around sexual assault. I left the military after my husband, who's still active duty in the Air Force, and I had our daughter. So just 3 years, about 2.5 years ago, I left, knowing firsthand how hard it is to maintain a relationship when both partners are serving, and recognizing that the challenge would only increase with a child. So I chose to focus on our family. After leaving, I worked as a training coordinator at BAE Systems and continued my research on sexual assault in the military during my undergraduate degree. And this kind of solidified my commitment to supporting survivors, especially within the military community, which leads me to now where I'm currently pursuing my master's in social work here at UM. My goal is to combine my military background and my dedication to helping others and advocate for those affected by sexual assault in the military, while hopefully fostering a culture of respect, understanding, and healing.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I will now open this up. I know we've got a large group watching this. I have questions that I can send to the group, and so I'm going to start that off. But if anybody that's here with us today has questions for our panelists, feel free to let us know, and we can make sure that our panelists can answer those questions. So the first question I'm just going to throw out to anybody that wants to unmute and answer it. I heard there's some people that did similar jobs when they were in the military, and there's some people that are doing almost the exact same thing that they were doing in the military. When I was serving, I used to tell people what to do. And as a therapist, I would ask people, how did that make you feel when you did that? And it was very different. So can you guys let us know, how did the military prepare you for what you do now? Or did it prepare you for that? Did being a weather forecaster help you be a better social work student right now? Or so tell us what that was like. Did the military prepare you for what you're doing now?
Yeah, I really do believe that the military prepared me for what I did now. I think routinely being able to um, interact with so many different like branches and walks of life and stuff, and being able to be that NCO and really getting to know my troops and stuff really prepared me into wanting to make a bigger difference and continuing to make a difference in the lives of civilians, or like I said, since we're still a military family, that I'm hoping to continue to work with the military community once I obtain my degree.
Coral, I see you unmute.
Yeah, so I would say the military has had a lot of effect on me, even though I went in as a nurse and I came out as a nurse, and essentially, I was doing the same job. However, you can't walk away from the military without having a better understanding of how to lead, how to guide. I learned a lot about mentorship in the military and how essential it is for officers and for our senior enlisted, our younger enlisted members. Um, and and throughout all the different types of individuals in the military, it's important to have a good mentor. And I took that with me when I left. I feel that I was so much more prepared for my role as a clinical nurse specialist. Um, it has prepared me so much more. And I even started a mentorship program on my unit, and started mentoring nurses, brand new graduate nurses, to help, facilitate their success. Because not everybody, who goes into nursing feels confident out the door and can just run and do great things. They need to be prepared. They need help. They need someone they can go to ask questions. And so that was like one of the things I'm most grateful for is the leadership skills that I was provided and the mentorship, that I was also provided, but then also now can give back.
How about you, Kian? You said that going through the ROTC program kind of helped you know how to be successful, but how has your being a military officer, how is that helping you through school? Is that making you a better student?
Yes, I would say definitely being in the military, looking back to like 17-year-old me just finishing high school to now, I've definitely learned a lot of soft skills. I would say like my time management has improved, just my interpersonal tact, how my ability to interact with people has improved, whether there's a conflict or I need to advocate for myself. I think I've learned how to do that in a more positive manner that doesn't escalate a situation. And I also like have responsibilities at my unit now. So managing that with grad school sometimes can be tough. But I've been able to find that balance to where I don't feel burnt out, and I'm grateful that I'm at a unit that's very supportive and have those like resources in place so you don't feel like you're just like drowning in work. So also learning how to reach out to others when maybe a task is too large that I can't handle on my own is something I've really learned.
I love that you talk about soft skills because that's something that I think a lot of veterans bring with them, right? There's this kind of grit and there's this ability to get a job done. And it's the ability to be like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to fake it until I figure it out. And then I'm going to be super, super successful in that. And it's hard to put that on a resume or to convince an employer that this is the soft skill that you bring with you. Anybody else have any issues with like soft skill and how to translate that into what you're doing now? Sam, tell us about that.
Yeah, I can talk to that. At least in my role now in project management, if you're an officer in the military, you're planning a lot of long-term, short-term operations. You're taking consideration a lot of risk. How do we analyze risk and cost? Um, I would say, the military gave me some, leadership and how to analyze that, but the hill to come over was kind of maybe data dumping some old like language or nomenclature and actually learning industry, language or repertoire. So in project management, if you say I'm gonna float a deadline, I'm going to push a date out or something like that. To me, coming from the service, working with communication systems, working in electronics maintenance, that's to me, oh, I'm sending a piece of equipment to a higher echelon that, my maintainers can't do myself. So that was some homework I had to do. Transitioning out is I need to learn the industry knowledge. I've been doing the work, just been calling everything by a different name.
And absolutely right. The military has its own language altogether. And sometimes that language translates and sometimes it doesn't translate so well. And so learning first you have to learn this whole other language and then you have to unlearn this other language and then you have to learn the language that your industry's in, which definitely makes sense. How about Christina and Kira and Anna? You guys are kind of in this like situation where you are going to have patients, you're going to have clients. And I know that Christina, you worked with patients when you were in the military as well. Is it as easy to work with civilians as it is to work with military?
Yeah, so I guess I'll speak. I was an orthopedic surgeon in the Army, and that's still what I do. So yes, it's the same job, but there were a lot of things that I had to learn when I left military medicine and going into the civilian world for medicine. military hospitals run in a very distinct way. And a lot of, like what Samantha said, it's a language, right? It's a language, it's an understanding of the leadership hierarchy as well. And it's an understanding with your patients too, at so many levels. You didn't have to deal with insurance. I was able to get whatever I needed for my patients. I could be a very strong advocate for my patients, and I felt like that was never an issue. It was everybody was on board. You'd call, radiology about this patient who needs something, and it would just sort of happen. Everybody is invested in taking care of the patients and the families and the soldiers. And then in the non-military world, it was a little bit of a shock to my system to go into a hospital and realize I don't understand the leadership structure at all. It's very different. And it took me a little bit to figure that out. Additionally, I was used to, as an orthopedic surgeon, being a leader. And, I would walk in a room with a rank on my shoulder, and it was very clear who I was. And then all of a sudden, I'm in the civilian world. I'm an orthopedic surgeon who's a female. We are 7% of women overall, but I didn't really encounter difficulty with that in the military, perhaps because I wore a rank. And then when I got out of the military and I would walk into a room with a room full of males, nobody knew who I was. So it took me a little bit to realize that that was something I was up against as well. Insurance was definitely something new for me to have to deal with, to figure out, how do I advocate for my patients? You really do have to fight for your patients. So that was something new for me. And then also being able to have a relationship with the families. I felt like in the military, sometimes it was a little bit easier to connect with people because we all understood the system and knew the system. And I knew when a soldier was deploying what that was going to entail for his or her family who's left behind. And maybe I'm taking care of a child that's going to now transfer to a different base. And I could call that other base and I could make sure I facilitated care. But not being in the military is much more challenging to be able to do that for your patients. And I had to learn how to do that.
I'm going to throw a question from our group out here. So Abby asked us the question. She says, how can instructors support students who are active duty or veterans? What challenges should we expect? The benefits seem obvious. So thanks for recognizing that, Abby. But what challenges might somebody have when they're a student and have an instructor? Anna's like, I got some for you.
I
What you
got
got
some
in?
ideas. No, it's a great question. I think, especially for, I think, those on active duty, but even like veterans or military families in general, I think just being flexible and understanding, there can be last minute taskings, there can be over, night shifts, there can be, where you're having to figure out quickly a family care plan because of like, a deployment or, something along those lines. And so just being able to be flexible with like deadlines or just, if they can't make a class or something, I think just showing that empathy and understanding and just working with them, like, instead of just being like, nope, this is a hard no, kind of F you.
Yeah.
Sure, you've got some input too. Let us hear it.
Yeah, I think I echo pretty much everything Anna said. And for being in like the National Guard, sometimes, being activated to certain tasks would take up multiple weeks. I know like during the COVID mission, we were still doing class at the same time, but I still was actively in Michigan, even though my university was in Milwaukee, trying to, spend long hours, a lot of travel throughout Michigan to get people supplies that they needed. So the things that were really helpful for me that I got a lot of support with my instructors were those very flexible deadlines, and was able to even do things like incompletes and like push out my timelines so that when I did come back, I could still finish appropriately. They even tried to kind of manage a little bit of the workload as well too, to see what would be most critical to get the knowledge out of the class, but also maybe minimizing some of the assignments as well too. So I found those really, really helpful.
I love though hearing that you can only have that kind of support if you're sharing your experience, right? And so obviously you shared with your instructors, this is what's going on in my life. So, I do encourage, if there's anybody out there that they're like, oh gosh, I don't know how to get support from my instructor, I bet that conversation really changes it a lot. So I see Christina's has some input, and then I'll go to you, Anna.
All right, I'll be quick. I think for the instructor, to ask that student, what does your military involvement look like? Because as everybody on the panel is speaking, we see that it is so diverse and so different for so many people, whether you're National Guard or reservist or active duty or, whatever, retired, but you still do some things. So I think that's helpful for that teacher to reach out to the student and say, explain to me what this looks like for you.
I think, that's a really important piece, because your experience might be different than, everybody else that's in your room. I know when I went through my grad school programs, my experience as a veteran was not as important as the fact that I was married and had two small children that I was trying to juggle. And so if somebody said, how does your experience as a veteran impact what happens in the class? Not as much as trying to plan what's for dinner tonight. And so it might just be what someone is going through in that moment is really important too. And what you do see with veterans who are students, they tend to be a little bit older. I don't think that they're like old. We look like a pretty young panel, if you ask me. But they tend to be a little bit older or have a little bit more experience. Anna, talk to us. What have your instructors done or not done that's made it
Yeah,
easier for you?
sorry. I was like, they jogged my memory on some other things that I figured. I think communication is so important for, be it not even the instructors, but the member themselves, be it if they're, active duty, if they're, reserves, if they're a veteran, if they're still like somehow connected, military spouse or something like that. When I was working on my undergraduate degree, I was at my last semester and my husband got orders to PCS out. And this was not a school that was very good at online and stuff. And so I was like, I don't want to like have to try to find a new school and transfer. And I just want to finish my degree on time. And so I talked to my advisor, and luckily, since I had good communication with all the professors in that um, study, they worked with me. They found me online classes that I was able to take and that would fit what my program needed. And I was able to graduate on time. So I think just explaining, and I just have learned that as long as you're honest and upfront with professors and things like that, they usually are willing to work with you.
So let me ask another question of the panel. So I know there's stereotypes. When you ask anybody to close their eyes and think what a military veteran looks like, I guarantee you until they came on to this panel today, they weren't thinking of anybody that looks here. What are some of the stereotypes that maybe you've had pushed against you as a woman veteran? Go ahead, Anna.
Sorry. I just laugh at that because Veterans Day was what, Monday? And my mom, I think it was like 9 o'clock at night. And then she just wished my husband and I happy Veterans Day. And then when I called to thank her, she's just like, I just forgot that you guys are considered veterans. Like, I always just think of these like old men who, served in like World War II or Vietnam and stuff. And she's like, not my young daughter and thing. And she's like, and I just saw a really random post on Instagram. I was like, oh yeah, I should go tell my daughter, happy Veterans Day. And then I also think it's interesting that you kind of brought up, what stereotypes that women face. And I don't know if everyone would agree with me, but like, I find that question also interesting because just a couple of weeks ago in one of my social work classes, we were asked to write a reflection on our inner oppressors. And I realized that so much of mine revolved around being a woman in traditionally like male dominated world, like the military. And that like one of my biggest stereotypes I faced and continue to battle internally is the idea that women aren't as competent as men, and that our successes are due to lower standards or DEI initiatives. Growing up throughout my military career and even to this day, I encounter situations where my abilities are doubted, even by people, sadly, that are close to me. For example, like my dad often downplays my achievements by suggesting that I only succeeded because the standards were adjusted for women, which is frustrating when your hard work is dismissed, as if you only got there because the bar was lowered. And so like these external voices kind of plant those seeds of doubt, at least for me. And for example, like when I graduated from Arizona State back in 2011, yes, I am old, with a 2.17 GPA, I was like convinced that academics weren't my thing, especially being diagnosed with ADHD so late in the game. But joining the military and excelling there, be it just from the start, scoring high on my ASVAB, graduating like top 10% in my BMT class, getting Airman of the Year, etc. I started to realize I was capable of so much more than I was led to believe. And like, but even so, like the stereotypes, unfortunately, just don't vanish. There's still this misconception that women veterans don't look the part, like you mentioned, or that somehow we had it easier. When I mentioned that I like just the other week, I mentioned that I always scored over a 90% on my, or a 90 on my PT test. I still hear to this day, as a veteran who's out of the military, well, that was by female standards, right? And I always feel like the need to say, well, I would have still passed the male's test too with my score. And they would say, yeah, but I'm sure it wasn't as high as, you know, blank's score, like my husband's, for example, as if like my achievements were somehow less. And so it's taken time.
One of the things that I know about women veterans, and talking about like what you're talking about, Anna, is female service members tend to be the most visible. If you don't pass your test, they're going to be like, oh, that woman didn't pass her test, even though there's like 20 men that might be struggling to pass their test as well. And so what's, you know, one of the phrases that I hear a lot is that women service members are the most visible, and yet women veterans are the most invisible, where they don't always see us for who we are, whether it's because we don't wear the hats to identify, or because we're a little bit more nervous parking in veteran parking spaces at Lowe's, or, you know, it's a really hard thing where you are very visible and people are watching you, because if you don't succeed, it's because of your gender. And it is not because of your gender, but that's the stereotype that some people throw out.
Exactly.
What about other stereotypes? Are there other stereotypes? I know, Sam, you've been in communications, dealing with SATCOM radios, and now you're, you know, working in a very highly STEM environment. Are you seeing any stereotypes thrown against you in either of these aspects?
I would echo Anna. It's the, you know, the questioning of your competency. How did you get there? I've also had, you know, people ask me like, oh, you're a female Marine, you must have had all female Marines. That's who you led, you know, and you were grouped off that way. Or, oh, I see you went to an infantry battalion, but you probably carried a female weight. And I'm like, no, like I barely ever had females, and we were the most noticeable on camp because if we saw someone with a bob or like a bun or something from across the way, it's like, hello, are you good? And, you know, workups into deployment and stuff like that, all of the weights, the things you had to carry, the gear, the extra, you know, radio batteries, the extra equipment, the love was spread across everybody, to the point where there was sometimes dump your bag checks. So you didn't want to be the one that, you know, had a light pack when it got put on the scale or didn't have what you needed to have. And, you know, I think as one of the few women that I like worked with, we felt the pressure to like, the bar is very high because the eyes are on us, and we're often, you know, there's only a couple of us in the room or in the area, so we're also constantly compared to each other.
Now, I know in my civilian world, people often say, oh, I'm this, let me let you all in on a secret. I'm this like funny, personable, people like me. And then they find out I'm a veteran and they're like, oh, she's so intense and she's so like strict. What kind of stereotypes do people throw on you as you know, when they find out, oh no, she was in the military? And then does it change for you when people find out? Kian, I see you nodding. Tell me what you're seeing.
So, I would say like, because I try not to like bring it up in conversation that I'm in the military with civilians, just because I don't know, I like to keep those things separate. But a lot of times, like out of nowhere, people will like bring up like random stereotypes, like, oh, you must like to do push-ups, or you know you're really serious, or like you must not be sensitive, or like weird things. And it's like, I'm still a human being, even though I serve in the military. So it doesn't really change. I mean, you are going to change with your service, but you're not turning into a robot. And I think that's what a lot of people think. And so sometimes it can be awkward navigating that. And I remember maybe a year or two ago, I was stopping at a gas station on my way back from drill. So I was in uniform, and this like older gentleman came up to me, and he was like, "Oh, like I served in like 1980 something," and I'm like, "Oh, okay," like trying to engage him and be polite. And he's telling me this story about how like his first sergeant used to call like everyone like soldier and like all these different things. And he's like, so what do they call women now? And I was like so baffled, because I'm like, soldier? Like, how is it different? Like, gender does not impact your ability as a soldier, airman, Marine. So I think just seeing people not being able to like make that connection can be tough at times.
How about like Christina or Coral? I think it's interesting. You guys are both doing similar jobs to what you were doing in your military experience. Do you see different stereotypes when someone finds out that you are a veteran?
Okay, sorry. I don't know. I think I've been similar to what's been said already. Some people who assume that because you're female, you did things differently, and that the training was not even equal. So perhaps that stereotype does exist. I don't know. I think I do find, though, a lot of times in my job, if the military gets brought up, um, there'll be a nurse in the room, maybe, or an MA or somebody who goes, "Oh, you were in the Army. I was in the Navy," and so kind of the opposite. It's like this little secret sisterhood, brotherhood, that you connect with someone that you didn't even know, but they just happened to find out you were in the military, and it's a really cool experience. Um, I don't know. I think maybe some of the stereotypes too are that, you like what's been said, you're super hardcore. When they find out that I'm a mother and I have two kids, some people think, well, how could you do that if you were in the military? Um, some of those stereotypes, I guess.
Coral, I'm actually going to ask you a more focused question, because there's a question that came up through the Q&A that I think is really remarkable for you to think about. So from an anonymous attendee, they've asked about a book called The Woman, The Women by Kristen Hanna. If you don't know this book, it's about this young woman whose brother joined the military. And so she also, as a nurse, joined the military. And as she's going through this story, and this is a book from the 60s, as she's going through this story, she's green, which, she's unsure of what she's doing. She's new to her profession, and she's judged a little bit differently than some of the men who are also new to their profession and don't know what they're doing. So I know when she joins it specifically as a nurse, Coral, you had talked about the mentorship and the need to mentor nurses, especially in what you're doing. Did you see that? Do you see it? So the question was, have you read the book, The Women? Hopefully I gave you guys the Cliff Notes version of it. We have the same issues in 2024. How can this be? As women, how can we break down this wall that we're judged differently when we don't necessarily know what we're doing than a man who's maybe judged differently than us?
So what an excellent question, first of all. But I personally have not read the book. I did not know about it, but now that I do know,
I
I've
think I'm
got some
saying it
reading to
right,
do.
so we'll see.
Um, you know, it is hard. When I went into the military, I went in with a few years of nursing experience. So I didn't necessarily need to prove myself as a nurse, but I really needed to prove myself as an officer. And I felt that was really a big struggle. They for the Air Force specifically, you know, our training is 5 intense weeks. It's not as extreme as it would be for an enlisted member, but it's 5 weeks, and that's not enough time to really learn what you need to learn um, to be a good officer. So I know I struggled a lot when I first started because I didn't know what I was doing. Everything that I had learned by the time I got to my first base, I think it was already gone. So I had to kind of relearn everything. And yeah, I will say when there were newer nurses that came in that were male, and the expectation was that they already knew what to do, but I didn't. So I had to work really hard um to be a good officer and learn. And so that's why, again, I think the mentorship is really important. I, you know, was mentored by a nurse who had been in for 10 years and who was an officer. So she was able to help guide me in those really specific officer things, so that I needed to know to really push all those male guys aside. So yeah.
I'll say, I tell anybody, male or female, if you want to be really humbled, take a new job, because you're going into a situation where you might have been really great at what you were doing before, but now you might not even be using the same email system that you were using. And so, if you want to be really humbled, you take a new job. And I think that's one thing that veterans have to do once you leave the service, whether it's leave it for good, or some of our individuals on our panel are still serving and put on that uniform on the 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. But when you take that uniform off, you might be really great at what you're doing in that capacity, but you got to code switch a little bit and go into another world. And sometimes it's humbling until you figure it out, but that's true for men and women both. So hopefully, to this anonymous attendee, maybe that's just what we need to whisper in the hallway as we pass everybody, that everybody feels a little bit doubtful on whether they can be a hero in their own life, but we're all behind you. Let's ask some other questions. So I don't see any other questions from the people that's viewing this, but if you do have questions, please type them in. We'll ask them. But I'll ask you guys. So let's think back either to your 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, or a couple of years ago, or 20 plus years ago. What was the hardest thing for you during your military service? I'm looking for anyone. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the hardest thing for me was deployment. I went to Kandahar, Afghanistan in 2014. Um, and I wasn't with a big group. There was a total of 5 of us. We were a detachment from Bagram. So it was a very small group. Um, we worked basically as a 24-hour operation. So I worked every day for 7 months. We lived basically in, the large shipment containers that you see on like the docks. That's basically what we lived in for 7 months. We didn't have, clean running water. So, you know, the food wasn't always that great. There was not that much activity in Kandahar because it's a smaller base. So you know how like some of the bigger bases when you're deployed, they get all these great celebrities that come in and do all these great things.
They have
We really didn't
Chick-fil-A,
have,
they have,
yeah. So we really didn't have that. So we were really isolated and just grinding every day. And so that was really hard, but it was also some of the most life-changing things I've ever done, and coming out of it so much better. I'm so much a better person because of that.
Christina, I see you unmuted. Tell us but then you hit mute again, so unmute yourself. Tell us what the hardest thing about being in the service was for you.
Okay, can you hear? Okay, I'm on. Very similar to Coral, I would say my deployment to Afghanistan. I was a new young orthopedic surgeon. I had a 3-year-old and an 11-month-old, and I deployed to a little forward operating base called ABAD, very small, as myself and a general surgeon only. And this was a long time ago. It was in 2009, when internet was not very good. and I could talk to my family. We would try to talk. We didn't even have, I forgot what platform we used. Maybe it was like the very original version of Zoom, and it barely worked. So maybe I would get to talk to them once a week if I was lucky. And my kids, my husband would hold them up and then they'd, go running. So that was hard for me because of family. And I had a very similar living experience to Coral. Um, but in hindsight, after coming back, I think it's probably the most rewarding experience of my career, honestly. And it's like a place in my heart that will always be there. Taking care of Afghans, Americans, anybody who got hurt out there. It was a really powerful, remarkable experience.
Now, all throughout there, so all throughout there, my experience in the military that was hard, being very vulnerable, I didn't have a lot of friends because if I hung out with a lot of women, I was considered a lesbian. If I hung out with a lot of men, it was because I was, like the young kids call it thirsty nowadays, right? Neither of those things were true. And I was kind of, if I hung out with the spouses, which was where people would try to push me to hang out, I was then hanging out with individuals that weren't really sharing my lived experience. And so I found ways to be very independent and very introverted in my personal experience. And so for me, that was one of the things that was really hard. I see some head nods on this. So let's keep it going. Who else? What was the hardest thing about your military experience? Or was it all easy? It was all easy. Kira, I haven't heard from you for a while. I know it wasn't really easy, and I know that a lot of what you do now, even still serving, isn't easy. What's the hardest thing that you're seeing?
Yeah, I feel like I definitely echo a few things, and even thinking of being in like a construction unit, which is usually male dominated. But I think we touched on that a lot. But another piece that I've kind of found more difficult is because of the like split, and having like these 2 weekend, 2 days a month, 2 weeks a year, has not been like the experience. It's usually a lot more than that. Especially if you want to advance in your career and kind of do new things and get to where you are. So just that split, that initial like if I do have a training coming up, like next year, my 2 weeks is going to be more like 3 weeks long. So thinking about work, especially with training, getting hours. So really having like some conflict between like really wanting to support my unit and be there with them because they depend on me, but also here in my role. I have patients, supervisors, so it's just kind of, I think that's probably the toughest is having that split and feeling like that mixed pull between where I want to be and how to kind of cope with that.
Let me go back and add just a little bit of cultural piece to this in case we have anybody that's joining us that doesn't know. So Kira did a great job of not using air quotes, which I use when I talk about the Reserve and National Guard. You see the commercials, it's 2 weeks a year, 1 week in a month. But that's not always what it is because you can't show up and not have had your foot in the door for that time that you were doing your civilian job as well. There are, I can't remember, I think Anna was talking about, there's physical fitness tests. They're typically called PT or PTFs. There's tests that you have to take. You can't just not run for a month and show up and run 3 miles under the time limit that they expect you to. So when the National Guard and reservists talk about their 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, that's a sizable amount of your time that you are putting on a uniform and dedicated to this. But when that uniform's hanging up in your closet, you're still dedicated to this and working through this. So, Kian, I know you're still putting on that uniform for that period of time too. What's the hardest thing for you?
So I would say right now, I'm the lodging and kind coordinator for my unit. So like throughout the month, I'm getting a lot of hotel requests for soldiers. I have to take care of the paperwork, coordinate with the hotel, and make sure everything is taken care of. So, sometimes it can be hard and frustrating because I'll give deadlines and maybe people don't get the paperwork in on time, but I still, want to make sure they have a room for the weekend if they live far from the unit. So I think for me, it's like finding that balance of like, being strict with the expectations I set out, but also like not just being completely insensitive to people's situations. So I think that can be conflicting for me, especially since like I'm new, I'm a second lieutenant at my unit, and since I'm at a medical brigade, most of it's very officer heavy and a lot of like full board colonels, lieutenant colonels. So it also can be daunting to navigate, like, oh, like this baby LT is like telling me I need to do this, or scolding me for this. So definitely like using like the chain of command and relying on my commander to help me navigate those situations.
Anna, share with us what's your experience.
So I feel like mine, I feel like almost started like immediately. I was never, I would have never thought that I would join the military ever. I just wanted, I was actually married to an active duty soldier, and I was like, I want to go back to school. And I joined late. I think I know somebody else. Yes, Coral. She joined late too. I joined, I think,
And
at
for those listening, these
28.
are very young women in the scheme of our age expectancy. But I know for a fact, I made fun of Coral when I met with her earlier, that you were probably called grandma. If you are older
Yeah, I
than
was mom.
18,
Yeah,
19
definitely.
years old and you're joining, you're considered very old at that point. Sorry.
Mhm. No, you're yeah, we were. I was definitely the mom of any unit I was at. But then again, I really just like taking care of my troops. But anyway, when I joined, I was like, I want my GI Bill. I can do anything for 4 years. And my husband at the time was like, just don't join the army. Like you're smarter than that to join the Air Force. And I was like, okay. And so luckily we just kind of assumed that since he was the army, he was going to be the one gone all the time. But then I got weather because I joined without knowing my job. And I was gone, just this, what is it, 6, 7 weeks for basic training, but then I was gone for 9-month tech school. And then I came home for a couple months, and then I was gone for another 3 months of more weather training. And I came home for a couple months, and then I was gone for a month-long training to learn how to army. And then came back, I was just, for my first year and a half, I was always training. And then, we had his field exercises on top of that. And then once I hit deployment, and I, like some of these other women, were in a like austere location and operating base with no internet, and having mice eat my, protein bars, and hoping that the Marines would come with their little travel, store. We came back and we realized we were separate people, different people. It was hard to keep yo-yoing back and forth thinking. And so we, sadly but amicably decided to get a divorce. And so like somebody that you were planning to spend your whole life with, all of a sudden becomes a stranger because you're just spend more time apart than together. And like, I now happily married. I've met my husband who, we were both weather forecasters, and he's still in as a loadmaster. He's changed his job, but it's just, I knew that when we had a baby that I was like, I already knew that I wasn't going to risk my marriage again or my family by trying to keep us both in, and wanted some kind of stability for our child or try. So anyway, what I'm just trying to say is like, yeah, there's a lot of challenging. Like right now I'm, a civilian, still living on a military base, but I'm lonely. Like I live in the middle of nowhere, well, not nowhere, but I live in the middle of Arkansas, a place I would never choose to live. But people are like, just you need to get out there. And I'm usually very good at putting myself out there. As you can see, I talk a lot. It's the ADHD in me. But I'm like, I have so many friends all over the country. That I'm having a hard enough time making sure to keep those connections flourishing to want to add more. So yeah, it can be hard from the beginning to the middle to now.
So Sam tell us, Sam, what's your situation? What was the hardest for you? Oh wait, you hit mute.
All right, we're back. I would say, one of the hardest things, I would echo the group a lot, is deployment. Mine were not to the Middle East. I was usually paired up with the Navy and on ship underway. And I would say it was a very it was a great and enlightening experience. When you're on ship, it's literally a floating city, the way everyone has their own role or multiple roles to support each other. But you also have no personal space. So whether you're officer or enlisted, people often have, they'll call it a coffin rack. So your beds are stacked like bunk bed, 3 or 4 high on top of each other. All of your belongings, you can lift the lid of your bed and that's all you have as personal space to, if you have a lock, that's great. And you can put your belongings in there. And sometimes you're able to reach out and talk to family. Sometimes you can't, depending on operations. I would also say one of the hardest challenges on the officer side, I would say, especially as a female, is during your 20s or your early years as a leader, and those are formative years, is who are you and what's your leadership style? At least in the Marine Corps, it's known for being, I was in an infantry battalion, so a lot of the leadership style was very machismo. I don't know how else to explain it, very masculine. And in the Marine Corps, there's a pointed document or guidance. It's called John A. Lejeune's, relationship of officers and men, between officer and enlisted. And it's supposed to be of that of father and son, or teacher and student, scholar and mentor or mentee. And so sometimes reading the language or being in a room where you're the only woman, it's like, how do I conduct myself and be a leader that's true to me? Because if you are, try to be something that you're not, people are going to smell that very quickly and not take you seriously.
So one thing that was fascinating when you were talking, Sam, I don't know if you saw, I'm watching Kian's face and she's like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't go into the Navy, right? Because I hadn't heard of what a coffin rack was and your stuff's all stored under there. Sounds, it's really sounds, I saw your face, I saw it. But one thing I think is really interesting is just because you were in the military doesn't mean that you know what all of the branches of military are like, or what a different deployment is like, or even, I ask everybody, what did you do in the military? And people will say, oh, I was a 76, 99, 52. I don't know what that means. Can you tell me what the plain language was of that? Because I know what my job was, and I could tell you what most of the jobs in the Marine Corps were. But I don't necessarily know what those numbers mean in the Army or the Air Force or the Navy. Abby had a really interesting question here in the chat that I'm going to throw out to you. She says, maybe this is an overly simple question, but how did you get your jobs? I hear a weather report or a weather forecaster, which is not the person that stands in front of the big green screen and points to whether the clouds are coming in our way. So I'll see how you all got your jobs. I will say personally for me, because I was enlisted and then I was an officer. When I was enlisted, you take a test to enlist in the military. It's called an ASVAB. I don't remember what that stands for. Somebody probably does. And then based on your score, they say you would be really good at this, 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 or this. And then you get put in something totally different anyways, based on the needs of the military. When I was a Marine Corps officer, we went through 6 months of training school. And Sam, I don't know if they still do it the same way because there's a little age gap between us, but you went through 6 months of training school and you got graded on every single thing. Then they lined us all up in the hallway, the top of the class and the bottom of the class. And then the very first person got to go in and pick what their job was. And if maybe, hiking with a big heavy pack wasn't your thing and you were further back, you became a supply officer like I did. So it was always based on the needs of the military, but for me, the experience was random. How did you guys get your jobs? And what did you really do in your job? Kira, let's hear from you for a second here, because I love what you do. So unique. So you do a lot of construction, you do a lot of, is it electrical work?
Yeah, so for at least the military, for at least National Guard, and I'm curious if Kian has similar things being reserved, but you're right where it's like the needs of the military, but being Michigan, we only have so many units with so many positions. So I got to pick my job before going in. So I knew I was going to be a carpenter mason when I joined the military, and after basic went to my job skill training. And I mostly chose it because with the ASVAB, there was a list and then there were certain bonuses sometimes attached to them. So it was kind of nice for Michigan. The carpenter mason was high on the list for bonuses. That was a crucial need. And I have a lot of family background with my mom and dad and everything that they have some construction background. So I thought it'd be a good set. I always tease I can do military construction, but you don't want me to come over to your house and do anything like that. But yeah, so that's pretty much kind of what we do. A lot of like re-roofing is what we've been doing a lot for the DNR. They just put in a new playground set, one of the northern state parks. So a lot of things like that, like basic, I guess, construction and framework. Not so much of the modeling and making them look pretty. They just got to be standardized. So that's what we were doing even in Afghanistan. Some people got sent out on like route missions and things, but for the most part, we did our job, which was we built dining halls, barracks, bathroom facilities, and really try to make them complete because we were on a small base in Afghanistan trying to build that up for everybody there. So.
Kian, is it the same in the reserves for you when you got assigned to be nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons? Was it the same way?
So it's a little different. I guess I can talk about the enlisted side first. It is very similar to what Kiara was mentioning. And you start with your ASVAB, get your score, and based off that you get an option for jobs, and then definitely for bonuses is a motivator to choose your MOS. So for ROTC, for your I think first 3 years, you get ranked on an order of merit list based on your GPA, your PT score, and like your performance at advanced camp. I think they used to call it LDAC way back when, if people remember that. But so based off of that score, they have like different windows of jobs available in the reserve that are like needs of the Army type thing, and based off those needs you can select a job. So it's unique because you have the opportunity to choose a vacancy anywhere in the United States or a territory, but typically, of course, you want to choose something that's close to your house. And so for me, there were 2 opportunities. Sorry, let me backtrack. So I ranked my top 3 branches. So I did medical service, chemical corps, and I think military intelligence. So based off those 3 branches, I was able to find vacancies in my area. And specifically for chemical, there were 2 vacancies, one like nearby, and then the one in Ohio that I selected. But I ultimately decided on the medical brigade because since I want to go to medical school, I thought that exposure would be nice. And then I was actually a cadet at the military police brigade that had the vacancy. And I was like, oh, I think I'm okay at military police. I want to see the medical side of the Army. So that's how I ended up, with my job and at my unit.
Now, Christina, yours is very unique because you graduated from a service academy. They put you in the JAG Corps, which is essentially like the lawyer corps, for lack of a better phrase. And then you said, no, this is what I want to do instead. How did you get assigned to your first job, and how hard was it to move over to be able to go to medical school?
Yeah, so at West Point, it is very similar. It's like a rank. So when you are getting ready to graduate, you rank order what special field within the Army you're interested in, and then it really goes based on your class rank. And so it was actually the Adjutant General Corps, which is personnel. So it's
Oh,
different
I'm sorry,
than
yeah.
lawyer. Yeah, the Adjutant General Corps. So it's doing personnel, and we were doing but I always had an interest in medicine. I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do for a career. And so then once I got out into work at my first duty base, we were kind of we're kind of like the business center of the Army, right? If somebody is getting promoted or getting an award, or we did, funeral services, even, like, we did just such a variety of sort of personnel management in the Army. And it wasn't until I started working that I thought, I'm ready. I want to go to medical school. So I did have to apply for a military scholarship, and I had to get permission from my leaders and my commander in the Army to go to medical school to see if they would release me to let me go. The Army has a number of scholarships that they give out every year called HPSP. And so that was, it's for a health professions scholarship program. And they offer those scholarships to any college student who's interested in going into medical school. So I had to apply like anybody from around the country. And it is also, you know, again, a rank thing based on where you fall if you get it. And fortunately for me, I was granted that. I still had to get into medical school, which fortunately I got into. So it all sort of just came together and worked.
Sam, was it the same for you, Sam? Did they make you line up in the hallway there on the second floor of the
Oh,
barracks?
it's very similar. I guess to give a picture to everyone, the 6-month school that Jennifer was talking about is called the basic school, or TBS, like the news channel or the TV channel. But it's 6 months of, regardless of kind of what vocation you end up taking up, how to be a provisional like rifle platoon commander. So whether you're a pilot or you end up going law side or whatever it is, it's kind of a rite of passage for everyone. And yes, we were ranked top to bottom for a class of 250 new lieutenants. Part of the scoring, I don't know if this was similar for service academies or for everybody else, is you had regular periodic peer evals that factored into your leadership score. So if you were, you know, not a team player, that factored into your overall leadership score. I would say for me, I knew that I wanted to go into communication systems because my husband was enlisted and a lot of his friends, even though that was not his specialty, had worked in communication systems. And I was like, oh, this is very important. I don't think the military will be a forever thing for me. So I want something that's going to be translatable when I exit the service. I will say I went through the course in 2016. So combat MOSs had been opened up. They were soliciting for our class. We specifically had the commanding officer of the School of Infantry come speak to us. You know, we're soliciting applicants from females, from more minorities. I would say for my class at the time, we had more of the ladies, and out of 250 of us, there were only 25 female lieutenants, first and second lieutenants. A lot of them were focused on different specialties, especially if they had previous civilian work, other combat MOSs like artillery and tanks, or the ones that they really thought that they wanted to go and be some of the first initial candidates were already law contracts or aviation contracts. They had already passed their bar exam, so they're not going to make that huge career shift. And they already had intentions of being a JAG or a Marine Corps lawyer, but I kind of already knew which way I wanted to go.
So in the early 90s, Sam, those peer evaluations were called spear evaluations because it was a great way that you could ruin somebody's future potential by saying that they were a terrible person. So you had to watch your back on it. I don't know if that's what
Yes.
they were still called. Yep. Coral, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, so I just wanted to I know it seems like, okay, I'm a nurse, so I'm going into nursing, but there's a lot of different types of nurses out there. And so when I was recruited, they said, you're going to go, I'm an inpatient nurse, basically. And I was told I'm going to be on an inpatient unit, which is working bedside in a hospital. And 2 weeks before I got to my base, they said, oh, I got a call. And they were like, well, we're actually going to put you in a clinic. I said, okay, this is my first taste of military needs, right? I go where they need me. And so I'm not understanding what I was getting myself into. And so I went to a clinic and was very upset. And um, it's very different from what I was used to. And it was something to get used to. But then for a nurse, really, there's only two tracks. There's clinical, and for the Air Force, there's not a lot of bases with hospitals. So I think that's important to understand. So if I really wanted to do clinical, I would have to go back and get a degree and like be a nurse practitioner or something like that. Um, or there's flight nursing, which I had no interest in, or there's leadership. So they tend to track a lot of nurses into that leadership route if you want it or not. So that was kind of the track I was pushed into. So that's also part of the reason why I left. As much as I loved it, for me, being, helping growing nurses and then being at the bedside was really kind of an overwhelming feeling for me.
Anna, it looks like you want to piggyback off that. What do you want to add?
So basically I was just going to add like, it really, that wasn't it's not, as you can see, it's not a simple question at all. So thanks for asking about it. Like I said, when I joined older. And so actually I remember when I walked into the recruiter's office and took my like practice ASVAB test, apparently the recruiters were making bets with each other of how bad I would do, mostly because they claimed that from their understanding that most people who join later are so removed from like high school and stuff that they forget how to do basic math and stuff like that. So when I smashed the ASVAB practices, they were just like, oh my gosh, let's sign on the dotted line kind of thing. And I was just like, I mean, they didn't know that I was an 8th grade like teacher's assistant, and the ASVAB is basically an 8th grade standardized test. So if you're going to take the ASVAB, go look at your 8th grade math homework, English homework and stuff. But anyway, when I took the ASVAB, I scored very high on it, and my recruiter kept calling me for different jobs. And they were just jobs I really wasn't interested in, but all of a sudden, at least for the Air Force, you can join the military not knowing your job. I joined Open General. And so I didn't know my job until like, I don't know, week 4 of basic training. They kind of showed you a list of what was available then, and you ranked them, and like kind of did a mini interview at basic training. I had military operations and some other intelligent job, geospatial, I think. And I was not considered for the geospatial because apparently I had like depth perception, like problems or something. And so anyway, I think weather forecasting was 3rd on my list out of like 8. But at the same time, I was like, again, I can do anything for 4 years. I graduated high school. So I wasn't too worried about whatever I was given. I'm very thankful I was given weather forecasting. It was such a fun career. And like you said, Jennifer, it was not standing in front of a TV doing weather
I can
forecasting.
add to that, to the person that asked the question. Imagine that. Imagine taking a job somewhere and you don't know. You could be a
Oh
cook,
yeah, I had no
you
idea.
could be a mechanic, you could be intelligence. You don't really,
Be
you
a
could be
police
the police
officer.
force, you could have any range of things that's a little crazy. So
Yeah, and they
it
all
is
based it
it
off
is a
of
little
a
crazy.
test.
It's putting your hands really at the whim of the needs. We say the needs.
Yes,
So I'm
exactly.
looking at the time. So, oh no, prepare yourself for this. So I had this question that popped into my head when I was walking my dogs this morning. I'm going to tell you guys on this panel what my question is. I'm going to give a little bit of resources to anybody that's joined us, and then I'll have everybody go through one at a time and tell me the answer to this question. So pay attention. If you could pick 3 words to describe yourself before you joined, while you were serving, and now, what would those 3 words be? I'll go first. Before I joined, or when I joined the military, I was young. While I was serving, I was very motivated. And now I think of myself as a very kind person. And so if I were to pick some before, during, and after, those would be my words: young, motivated, and kind. I'll let you guys think about that for a second. I see the a feedback QR code has been popped up. If you are joining this, I see several participants. Please go ahead and scan this QR code. Your feedback is really important to make Veterans Week and seminars like this really what you're looking for as somebody associated with the University of Michigan. So if you have joined this, please scan this QR code and give us some feedback. I also want to say, if you are a veteran that has joined this panel, it's really important. You've heard from us how important it is to find your tribe, to find people that you can build a relationship with. There's many ways you can do that. You can go to some of these national organizations like the VFW and the American Legion. There's some very specific organizations that not everybody's heard of. There's one called Marines for Life. There's the National Guard Association, both the state and the national. There's the Navy League. Every branch of service has a way for service members to be able to connect with each other, even as veterans. If you are a student at the University of Michigan, the Student Veterans of America, PAVE, the peer advisors for veteran education, and even stopping into the U of M Veterans Resource Area where Phil Larson is, will get you connected with other people going through similar things to you. If you are trying to connect with women veterans, if you've joined our panel because you too are a woman veteran and you're looking for ways to build a tribe, here at the University of Michigan, you can seek out a department called CEW Plus, the Center for, oh gosh, how did my mind blank on this? For the education of women at the University of Michigan. They specifically reach out to women who are seeking their education, and especially underrepresented women. You can also join an organization like the Women Marine Association. There's a woman veteran coordinator assigned to every region of the United States. You can find those by just typing in Google Woman Veteran Coordinator. They can help you connect. Now that we've done a few resources, let's go back to our panel. I'm going to go one by one. You can jump in when you want. But Coral, if you could describe yourself before you were serving, while serving, and after you were serving, what words would you pick?
So before serving, I would say I was pretty unsure. While I was serving, a sense of self. And after serving, I feel very proud.
Sam, how about you?
I would say prior to serving, I would say creative and motivated. During it, I would say closed off. Following, I would say open.
Hannah, how about you?
For me, the words I would say before joining would kind of be, I was unconfident but determined. And then while I was serving, I was confident and strong. And now I feel like I'm continued to be confident but hopeful.
Christina.
I would say before I joined, I was ambitious. When I was in the military, I was a workhorse. And then now I would say I gotta have two words, confident and empathetic.
Kira, you're next on my list.
It's definitely a tough one. I was thinking before, probably more like lost. I guess while serving are kind of the more middle of it, more adventurous. And then now, thinking of more like stability, I guess.
And then Kian, you're on our list.
So I would say prior to serving, I was determined because I really wanted to join the military. So it was actually funny when Samantha was telling her experience on the Navy ship because I originally wanted to join the Navy. So I'm glad I didn't. But so since I'm still serving, I'll say more of like my period of becoming an officer and all that training. I was definitely unsure. A lot of the obstacles I faced, I was like, I don't know if this is really for me. Should I be doing this? And now that I'm an officer and complete with my school, I would say I'm feeling more a sense of self and like I have purpose.
And I see somebody from our audience has typed in, hers would be determination, integrity, and perception. And so I'll also ask those that have joined this, whether they've served or whether they joined this hour and a half with us today to learn a little bit more about women veterans. You know, I would be interested to know what anybody thinks, what their thoughts of women veterans were before they joined, while they were spending their lunch or their time with us today. and when we close this out, what their thoughts are, because I know it's complicated, and I know that you know, you're likely to run into a veteran in your day-to-day life. You're likely to run into a woman veteran in your day-to-day life, but you might not know it. And so what is it like to see these individuals that are at the University of Michigan and know what it's like for you? I've seen a few other people type in here. I know one question that was left off that I wish that we had a little bit more time to answer, and somebody had answered it in the chat, is how hard was it to get a job for you when you were serving or when you left serving? And there was some great advice. It's not easy. You have to tailor your resume a little bit, and you have to kind of know what you're looking for. Many of the people on this panel, myself included, my transition into the civilian world was to go back to school and get a degree, because what I was trained to do in the military didn't really translate as much to the civilian world as I wanted it to. There was another question that was unanswered about, you know, with some of the changes that we might see coming forward, what's the future of women? I'm kind of paraphrasing, but what's the future of women in the military? And so I love hearing your past. I love that a few of you are actually part of our future right now and are still serving and are still paving the way for those that are following in your footsteps. And I hope that if there's anyone on this panel that is also still serving, or that, you know, knows that they have support of other people. All right, so that kind of concludes our time. I'll open this up for 5 minutes if anybody wants to give any last minute information. Would you, I'll just say, Kian, would you do a panel like this again?
Yes. So funnily enough, well, when I did ROTC here as a cadet, we were required to attend these panels. So I was like, well, now let me sign up and like be a spokesperson. So it's nice to be on both sides.
I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did. How about Kira? How about you? I know that you've been also part of the community for a long, long time. What's it like to tell your story?
It's kind of nice. It's definitely a different atmosphere. It was really since I've only been here a short bit, it's definitely the first time that I've been in a setting where this has been an opportunity. So it's been kind of really nice to kind of share, and hopefully people have enjoyed it, of course.
I know Coral had talked to me before we did this panel about not always identifying as a veteran as one of the go-to things when you identify who you are. I hope that for you and for some of the other people on this panel, that this gives you the ability that people are really interested in your story and your experience and what it means. And I hope this was a valuable experience for you as well.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say it has been, and I love if someone asks me a question, I'm always happy to answer if they have questions about my military time. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of it today. It was wonderful.
And then I'll just close it up. We've got a great comment from somebody that was in the audience, really just thanking you all for your service and for a wonderful and enlightening conversation. So thank you all for joining today, whether you were listening or to this fabulous panel. I hope if you see them on campus, give them a thumbs up sometime and tell them how much you really enjoyed hearing their story.